All right, everybody, here we go with the notes for Chapter 6, talking about developing your unique style, what you bring to the table when you come to a recording session and you lend your voice to a particular piece of copy. So let's talk about what's in your toolkit. Now, we're not talking here about a literal toolkit that you carry with you and there's instruments in there. Your toolkit is going to be based on the things that you are able to do and the things that are rather unique to you in terms of your voice, your delivery, your style, and all those things. Matter of fact, speaking of style, it is what we're considering as your unique approach to interpretation and delivery. For the most part, no one is going to sound exactly like you in terms of your natural voice, and you can never really exactly duplicate someone else's voice. There are people that do imitations, but an imitation is just that. It's something that is supposed to represent or try to sound like or try to be like something else, but isn't quite there. So your style is uniquely you, and it's what you come up with. Now, the technique, those are the tools of your trade. That's the way that you take your style and you interpret it, the way that you make your voice sound, and the things that you add in terms of the skill that you couple with the style that you have. So the tools that you use help you to develop your approach to how you lend your voice to things. Having an understanding of basic acting and voiceover techniques gives you the knowledge necessary to record competitive auditions quickly and also to work efficiently under the pressure of a deadline and to make your performance more real and believable. So part of this is why we're talking about both skill and technique and style is that you go into a recording session and you don't really have a lot of time to be able to play around, do trial and error, at least most of the time. Generally, when you're in a recording session, you have a script. That script needs to get recorded and recorded in short order so that the producers can take that recording that you gave and mix it down, do whatever editing, add it to other people's recordings and create a production from it. And usually there is a pretty short time frame in which all of that needs to get done. So no pressure, but get in there, do your job, and get out of there. All right, that's kind of what tends to happen when we're talking about recording sessions. As a voice actor, your job is to give life to the words of a script, and this is achieved through your performing technique. We're not just reading words. We're adding emotion, we're adding attitude, we're adding emphasis on certain words to give a certain interpretation of those particular words and to be able to give that underlying meaning to what it is that we're saying. And all those things are kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about giving life to something. Technique must be completely unconscious. What we're saying there is that basically this has to become second nature to you. You can't take a ton of time to stop and think about how you're going to approach something in a certain way, or take a lot of time in trying to do trial and error. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do trial and error, and you can't think about, well, it might work this way, it might work that way, but you can't spend a lot of time doing that because, again, we're under deadlines here. So this is one of those things where you can't really be taught how to do things in an unconscious sort of way. It's part of the artistry of what it takes to do voice acting. To read something, to automatically kind of get into your mind as you read the script, okay, the script needs this kind of a voice to it. It needs to sound this particular way. It needs to be read quickly or slowly. It needs to be read with a certain flavor or style. Those things are going to come rather quickly to you the more and more that you read copy. And it does take time to develop that, but the professional is going to be able to, without a whole lot of thinking and processing, be able to look at something and say, okay, this particular read needs to be happy, or it needs to be energetic, or it needs to sound like I'm dying, or whatever the script calls for. And that's something that the more and more that you do it, it becomes more and more second nature to you. And basically, you just go into the studio and do it. And with that, though, you don't want to get too analytical. Again, you don't want to overthink things. Because, I love the example here from the author. He says you can dissect a frog, but it'll die in the process. In other words, overthinking could be overkilling your read when you go into the studio. Most times, thinking about doing things in an unconscious level. Many times when we go into a studio, the first interpretation that we have, the first instinct that we have on how to read something, by and large, is not going to be too far off from what it is that we really need to do. And the best thing to do is to try that approach first. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then we can think about what needs to be tweaked in order for the performance to come alive. And that's a decision that you might make. That's a decision that your producer might help you to make. But basically, go in there, just do it. Don't think too much about it. Don't get too anxious over it. Go in, do it. If something needs to be adjusted afterwards, fine, not a problem. So on one hand, yes, we're on a time schedule, but at the same time, don't take too much pressure in with you because, we're not doing brain surgery. We're not curing cancer. We're reading a script. And we have the luxuries of being able to re-record and edit. So just go in and do your thing. Adjust as necessary. Now, in talking about style, each of us has developed a unique vocal style for speaking in our everyday lives. And for most of us, it's possible to build upon this natural style to create a sound or a performing style that can be a marketable commodity. So you yourself are a product in this sense, because we're kind of answering the question here, what do you have that no one else has, or that very few people have? The sound that you have is going to be something that's very unique that you can bring. And it could be the exact right thing that a particular production needs. And with that, your natural speaking style is a reflection of how you perceive yourself. You have to have a certain amount of confidence to go into the studio and be able to do a read. You have to kind of understand who you are. You also have to understand who you're not. So it's a very honest assessment here. We're not talking about going into the studio with a big ego, but we are talking about knowing your skills, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, being comfortable in your own skin about those, and knowing exactly what it is that you have to offer. And putting that out there as your strong suit. In the words of the great philosopher Stuart Smalley from old school Saturday Night Live, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, people like you. So go into the studio with that and know that, in the words of another great philosopher, Fred Rogers, you are special. There's no one else in the world like you. So go in and be you. Your style as a voice actor expands by adding what you know about human nature, personality, character development, and acting. So all these things that come together, in addition to just your innate instincts, are going to be what helps you when you get into a recording booth. There's many very successful voice artists who have taken what might be viewed as vocal limitations and developed it into a highly successful performance style. One of the actors that comes to mind when I think of this in particular is Bobcat Goldthwait. He's the one that kind of sounds like this when he talks, and I can't duplicate him perfectly, but he's got that really high-pitched, scratchy voice. He was in the Police Academy movies. He's done some comedy, and his vocal delivery can be irritating to some, but he's turned it into something that's helped him to have a rather successful career. So another example would be, his mind is slipping. Gilbert Gottfried is who I'm thinking of. And he's got that high-pitched, rather annoying, almost sounds like he's yelling at you kind of thing. And he's turned that into a successful career. So just because you don't have that big, booming voice doesn't necessarily mean that you can't make it as a voice actor. Because what's great is that our world has so many different sounds when it comes to people, when it comes to how we speak. And in the voice acting world, we need representations of all those different types of sounds and all those different types of voices and all those different types of accents and limitations, quite honestly. But again, it's how you interpret those things, and that you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and quite honestly, you do what you can and you don't do what you can't. And if you want to try to do something that you can't do, practice, work at it to the point that you can master it. All right, your signature voice. You will likely fit into one of two categories as a voice actor. You will either have a variety of vocal placements and character voices, or you will have a variety of delivery styles. So if you're really good at the character voices, you can do imitations. You can give life to different types of personalities. Cartoon characters would possibly fit into your repertoire. And you might, though, wind up being limited into the different types of content that you would be able to do because you really excel at a certain personality type or a certain type of delivery style. In the acting world, they call it being typecast because you just really excel at doing that particular type of thing. The other would be having a variety of delivery styles in that you might have not the ability so much to change your voice for different character sounds and that sort of thing. But you've got the ability to do different types of reads from different subject matter. You might have the ability to have a wide range of emotion when you do a read. And generally, you're going to be one of those two types. And that's basically up to you to determine which one better fits you. You will ultimately discover a fundamental sound or style that you are most comfortable with when performing different types of copy. And this style is often referred to as your signature voice. Again, what is it that you do extremely well or that no one else can do quite like you? That is who you are. That is your signature voice. As a professional voice actor, it is expected that you have the talent and the ability to make adjustments with your performance and your delivery style. So you start off with your base of what it is that you're strong at, and then you get flexible. You do what is needed to do as is necessary. And sometimes that means being told what to do in a way that you hadn't thought of before, or you think might be different from what you think should happen. And this is the point where you need to be a little flexible. You need to be a little humble. You need to learn how to get past your ego. It's not all completely about you. The thing of it is, there's very few people that people will go to listen to simply because it is that particular person. People listen to something because they can engage with the content, they can engage with the story, the way the story is being presented to them. It sounds realistic or natural or fitting for that particular type of production that is being put on. It's not about you. So get over yourself and do what is needed to be done. The road to proficiency. Acquiring a skill and becoming good at that skill is called competency, while becoming an expert with your skills is called proficiency. So you need to know how to do things, and then you need to be able to do those things well. So you must first become competent before you can become proficient. First, you have to have the skills. Then you need to be able to master those skills and make those skills work for you. The ways to become competent, this goes beyond voice acting. This goes into anything that we do in life. And the terms here are from the textbook. I've kind of simplified the definitions from the textbook here. And I would encourage you to, if you haven't checked these out in the textbook, the author gives some more elaborate explanations here. But for our purposes, we can first look at level 1, unconscious incompetence. In other words, you don't know that you don't know. You're not quite sure what it is that you need to do. You're not quite sure what approach needs to happen. You don't know the logistics of how certain things work. You're ignorant. You just don't know. So you learn and you get to level 2, conscious incompetence. So now you know that you don't know. Okay? You're no longer ignorant of what needs to happen and those sorts of things. You know there's something. You just don't quite know exactly how to go about it, or you don't know what steps to take, but you know that you need to learn. Thirdly, conscious competence. You know what needs to happen, but you have to think about it. You have to kind of lock yourself into those processes. Matter of fact, the other day I was working with a video camera, and the video camera was set up in such a way that it wasn't quite intuitive to me. So on a video camera, you have the little rocker arm that allows you to zoom in and zoom out. And on a lot of video cameras, that rocker arm is going to be on the right-hand side of the camera. And you would push the rocker arm forward to zoom in and backward to zoom out. Well, this particular video camera had the rocker arm on the top of the camera. And you actually rocked it not back and forth, but left and right. And I had to come up with a little trick to remember that in order to zoom out, I had to rock the little rocker towards the left. And then to zoom in, I had to rock it towards the right. So I kind of came up with the idea of saying, okay, I want to zoom out. Sometimes people feel left out of certain things. So I had to tell myself, using that tool, okay, I want to zoom out. People get left out of things, so I need to put the rocker towards the left to zoom out. And I had to stop and think about it at times when I was using that camera, and eventually I got it. So, that's the idea of conscious competence. You know what to do, but it takes a little bit for you to do it because you got to stop and think about it. Stop to think about it, I should say. And then finally, you get to stage 4, unconscious competence. You know what to do. You don't even have to think about it. It's second nature to you. You just go and you do it. It's a reflex. It's a part of you. So to become proficient is to get to that point where we get to unconscious competence, that we just go in and we do a thing without even having to stop and think about it. And for people to get to unconscious competence, they're very good at what they do. It does go to show, however, that, if you're at that stage and you're trying to teach somebody how to do what you do, you almost have to revert a little bit, because to you, it's just second nature. You go in and you do the thing, and the person that's trying to learn from you is like, wait, what did you just do? And then you have to stop and think about what you did. That's kind of what we're looking for when it comes to proficiency. It's that idea that you just go in and do the thing, and then, if you are teaching somebody afterwards to come behind you, maybe you do have to stop again and think about all the things that you've done. All right, 3 stages to achieving proficiency. First off, you want to understand the underlying mechanics. You want to know the basics of what it is that you need to do. Things like breath control, pacing, rhythm, timing. And we're going to talk about all these things in the second part of the video. So you need to understand the logistics, what the terms mean, how you approach doing all those different things. You have to understand those mechanics and logistics. Second, understand the theory and the principles. So we're talking now about the skill sets that are needed to be honed and polished. Things like script analysis, interpretation, character development, audience psychology, and that's an interesting one, because you're delivering a message. You want to reach an intended audience. So you need to know what the audience is thinking, what the audience is expecting. And your voice delivery needs to be able to meet those expectations. Thirdly, you need to apply the knowledge that you have. And this comes through practice and rehearsal. So we're studying techniques, we're taking classes, we're studying the work of others, following different trends out there, what is currently, kind of the accepted norms, the things that people are doing currently, what's working, and then working with what you've learned and putting it all together in how you do your job. 3 steps to achieving an effective performance. A voiceover performance will rarely be perfect. And again, this is great because I mentioned before, we're not doing brain surgery. We're not curing cancer. We're using electronic equipment to record our voice, and things mess up from time to time. I've even edited parts of this video because I've slipped up in royally bad ways that I don't want you to hear. So, thank goodness for editing. We do need, though, to practice with the mindset that knowing that there may be dozens of ways to apply a certain technique or to deliver a line of copy. So, trial and error, testing, experimentation. While we do need to have a pretty good instinct on what to do, again, we also need to be flexible. And what might seem good to us in the planning stage, when we actually do it, might wind up being disastrous. So we need to stop and rethink and change things around and do something a different way or take a different approach, whatever. Not a big deal. And then sometimes, even once the production is done and you hear it in the real world, say you voice a commercial and you approach that commercial in a certain way and you hear it on the air after the fact, you're like, you know what? I could have done that part better, or I could have said that line this way, and it would have made a whole lot more sense, or it would have made the the script much more funny and rememberable. You know what? It happens. You learn from it, make mental notes, keep it in your thoughts for the next time. Now, the first step is practice. We have to learn the skills and the techniques. When we're talking about practice, we're talking about the process of learning what is needed to achieve the desired results. We're talking about acquiring the skills and applying the underlying mechanics and the techniques to achieve proficiency. You know, if you play football and you're learning how to throw the ball and catch the ball, you don't just pick up the ball and throw. There's going to be thoughts about how strong you throw the ball, at what angle you throw the ball in order to have the ball reach the intended receiver at a certain location. Keep it in mind that the receiver is running as you're throwing. So you have to practice those things in order to effectively be able to throw a ball for someone else to catch the ball. And the catcher also has to be able to practice and know where he or she needs to be at that particular point in time in order to receive a ball that's thrown in a particular way. So we need to practice what we do when we are in the booth, when we are reading copy, when we are trying to determine, what sort of tone that we need to have here, how we pronounce certain words to make them sound appropriate for the script and for the character. All those things take practice and trial and error and practice. The practice process with any sort of copy, first off, you have your initial read through. Read through the script. Look for all sorts of things within the script in terms of questions, in terms of different places where you can show excitement or sadness, different types of emotion. If it's just kind of a declarative statement, a basic matter of fact sort of thing, or if there's something that requires a certain amount of excitement or passion. Look for hard to read words. If you don't know how to pronounce something, or if you don't know what something is, there's no shame in asking about what it is that you're talking about. What is this particular object or thing or concept that I've never heard of? And ask those questions for the producer. That's the next step in the process. Character analysis and script analysis. We'll talk more about these later on in the course, but there's a couple of worksheets in your textbook that help to guide you through what sort of questions that you need to ask and some things that are helpful for you to know as you are looking at your script and looking at your character. Things like timing, pace, and delivery. Especially important in commercial reads because you have just 30 seconds or just 60 seconds to be able to get your message across. And you also need to make sure that you get that message across not just in the correct timing, but that you space things out in such a way that the person on the other end is going to be able to follow your flow of thought. Locking in the correct pronunciation of complicated words. We've already talked about that somewhat. And then recording a few takes. It might take a couple of times to get just the right feel for what a script copy needs. Personal practice should be a lifelong quest to learn new skills and techniques. The practice phase at a recording session generally lasts only a few minutes. So what really winds up happening is that these things that we're talking about in terms of practicing and rehearsal and interpreting, these tend to kind of meld together. It's not necessarily kind of a linear process as much as it is doing all these things at the same time. So within the recording session itself, and then between recording sessions, when you go from job to job, you're going to find that you're going to be continually looking at ways to practice and hone your craft and, make yourself a stronger, better voice actor. Second step, rehearsal. Perfecting and improving techniques and skills. So rehearsal begins once all of the details of the performance are worked out. So you've talked about the logistics, you've talked about what emotions need to be carried out, you've talked about proper diction and articulation, the way that certain phrases need to be voiced, all that sort of thing. So all these things that you committed to during the practice phase, you are now bringing with you into the rehearsal. The process of perfecting the performance progresses through a series of takes as choices are tested and modified. Again, it's about being flexible. A little bit of trial and error. You do something, doesn't sound quite right, not quite to the producer's expectations, you make a change. Now, also keep in mind that sometimes you get it exactly perfect within the rehearsal. So you might wind up using parts of the rehearsal in the final piece that is produced. Set the tone of the delivery in your mind so that you can duplicate it as you polish the lines of the copy. So it's not just about delivering the line in a certain way, but you might need to remember how you did that because we're talking about certain logistics in the recording studio. Perhaps you did something absolutely perfectly, but the recording device was not set, or there was a malfunction in the control room, or you have to replace a microphone, or something happened. Or you did something and you tried some other things, and then you decide, well, let's go back to that first thing that you did, and you need to do it again. So try to keep a mental track of how you did certain things at certain times, because you might need to go back to it. Third step, performance. So you just do the thing. It's the end result of learning and perfecting and rehearsing and continuing on in that cycle. So we don't talk a lot about the performance phase because you're kind of performing in the middle of practicing and rehearsing. So, because again, all these things tend to happen pretty much at the same time, and you don't have a lot of time to be able to do these things. They happen rather quickly. So keep that in mind. In one sense, you're kind of working out what it is that you need to do when you're in the studio, but also, well, you're kind of always on. So you never know what might happen when you're in the booth. You might just go in, you might do the read, and it's one and done. Or it might take several takes. So whatever needs to happen is what happens. So you're doing practice and rehearsal and performance and all the things many times at the same time. So we're going to take a break here, and we will do section 6 of your notes in the next video, and that's going to talk about all the different tools that you could have in your proverbial toolbox when it comes to developing your style.